when I was going through the products that Talview is going to launch in future, I was both excited and nervous, I must say. Excited because I think we are fortunate to be in this era where we are seeing so many technology interventions coming our way and changing and reshaping the way we work. And nervous because I was just hoping that one day they would not come up with a product which will just go to our banks and take our salaries and spend it, and we don't get to do anything with it, right? So I think on the lighter note, it's great that we are progressing at such fast pace, but at the same time, it's important that we are cognizant of the fact that when technology changes, then we also need to change our skills to be able to adapt to the technology. And our intention here with this panel discussion is to share our thoughts and perspectives as we have some industry leaders with us, and talk about our experience, what our thought processes are, how our respective organizations are evolving in this journey. And towards the end, we would also want to make it engaging conversation, and we would probably also request you to participate in the discussion and share your thoughts with us, right? So on that note, I would open the discussion, and maybe we go with ladies first. So Nirupama, if you could talk about some of the challenges that you foresee or you face in your organization, which you think can be resolved by using technology.
Yeah, thank you, Dishant. And yeah, again, thank you, Talview, for giving us this opportunity. So I will start by, speaking about some of the areas where we are trying to solve for in our organization, and also some of the areas that we have heard peer organizations speak about in terms of challenges that we face in the talent space. So one of the key areas that we see there is a lot of changes and there are a lot of challenges is in the sourcing space. So when we say sourcing, it starts with, today the way the market works is that there are people who come to us, there are resumes that come to us for various job descriptions that we post, and the entire process of managing the mass that comes to us, the people that apply, whether or not it's completely in line with the job descriptions that have been put up, whether the job descriptions itself, describe clearly what is really needed. So all that becomes a recruiter's nightmare, and because of that, some of the, angst that is there in the business. In a growing organization, time to hire, like Sanjog clearly pointed out, quality of hire, and I would also add cost of hire, so both from a recruiting cost perspective and the right price point at which we get talent is very critical in some of our businesses. So the entire process on sourcing, I would just like to step back and see, I'm from the banking industry. And really, when we used to give loans, the people who come to us for loans were not necessarily the people whom we wanted to give loans. They were probably not necessarily the audience that we would want to go, or customers that we would want to go after. So we would want to proactively go and mine the customers and see whom we wanted to give loans to. And I see the talent market also becoming more and more in that nature, because all of us, want a learning workforce, a workforce which could adapt to fluidity in the future, which could be more and more, I would say, equipped to handle the changes that we are foreseeing. So this entire talent market landscape is changing, and the ability to go out there and proactively source talent and not really just deal with what comes to us is, I would say, one of the biggest priorities for us. There could be various levels in this. Maybe at the most basic level, we could look at what comes to us. But at various levels, there could be different strategies which we would need to follow through. So that is one area where I see technology and probably the power or the promise of AI. I say promise of AI because, AI still, I think, I know there are, areas where we have seen successes, but it's still an evolving field. But I would say technology can clearly play a role out there. The second area quickly that I would like to cover is the entire experience portion. Here I would actually step back and say this is both from an internal team member experience and external. So external candidate experience through the entire process, like Sanjo had also pointed out, we are talking about people who today don't know how to wait. They come into an interview and they want feedback pronto. And when we are unable to give it, it actually affects the brand of the company. It affects our ability to go back to the candidates and get them back in. So that part of it, the experience which we think we need to manage better. Experience from a team member perspective is with respect to internal sourcing. One of the challenges that we have is that when there are internal job postings, we get a lot of people who apply, and there is a lot of, so everybody understands that everybody doesn't make it, but there is a lot of angst around not getting proper feedback. There is an angst around not having closure around it. And that's because, the mass is so much, it's very difficult for the recruitment managers to handle it. So this experience piece is the other piece. And the third piece is the interaction piece, where there is a lot of routine kind of interaction that happens with candidates, with potential team members who could be looking at job changes, which we think there is a play for technology and AI, probably technology and workflow management to start with, then enhanced through cognitive and AI, with more and more data coming in, where we see a play in this, entire recruitment space. And of course, the entire assessment space, which I think is going to be covered in the learning session that, is going to follow. So these are some of the key areas that we as an organization are focused on in the talent acquisition space, apart from various other areas that we need to look at, operational and data-related issues that we need to take care of. Yeah.
Sure, thanks Anupma. Rahul and Vikrant, if you could share some of the challenges that you face as the leaders of your organization and the areas where you see technology can help.
Thanks, Dishank, and thanks for your insights. I'll actually give a quick brief of what ZS is, and then maybe weave my story around it. Hopefully that way it would be easier for the audience to gauge the challenges that we faced. Now, we are a niche consulting firm, and we help in transforming our client sales and marketing efforts. And we have been doing that since the past 30 plus years, primarily focusing in the pharma and healthcare domain. And as a matter of fact, we are also one of the toughest firms to get into as far as Glassdoor. I think we are number 7 or something up there. And to be the TA lead of such an org and helping and fueling this progressive growth year on year, the last 10 years or so, it's not been an easy job. But at the same time, the challenges of scaling it up from a 1,000 headcounted firm to about 5,000 today, in again the last 7, 8 odd years. And apart from that, bringing in the, introducing these interventions in the TA space from a change management standpoint wasn't that easy for us, for sure. So the two challenges that I'm going to talk about will be obviously scalability and change management that we were able to tackle through these AI interventions that we have introduced. Given the fact that we are not an easy firm to get into, we obviously used to have several rounds of interviews even at the junior most level, right? And our partners, so we had a partnership firm, our partners' involvement even in the hiring decision of someone joining at the junior most level was critical, yeah? So from that kind of a mindset, from that kind of a niche setup, where we have been able to get to today is improve efficiency and effectiveness by at least 30% in the way we have been seeing our application to offer ratios change in 17. And the fact that our leaders have been acceptable to this kind of a product or intervention has been just tremendous. Yeah. So these are the challenges that I could talk about from my org standpoint.
Thanks, Rahul. Vikrant?
And before I come to the challenges, I think I'm going to point out the opportunity, and I'm going to be point blank in that. I don't think it's an employer's market anymore. Honestly, it's the talent's market. The talent or the workforce that we're looking at has very low exit barriers They can join firms quickly and they can leave them even faster. They have liquid expectations. They're not looking at a long-term career. Long-term would translate into 4 or 5 years. They're looking at building a portfolio career. So they're looking at multiple opportunities within an organization. Now, what this requires, the challenge that this brings to us as firms is, how do we put our best foot forward in front of this talent? Now, that obviously means that we have to clean up our systems. We have to clean up our processes. We have to clean up our mindsets. We have to train our business that you wouldn't get 10 candidates per position, honestly. So, that's, I think, to my mind, that is going to be the biggest challenge. And, honestly, I think AI is, and we shouldn't actually take AI, the word, lightly. I think it's an important, and it can be a game changer if implemented over a smart process. Otherwise, it's the same thing with, that's the other challenge that I'm pointing out. If you put up smart technology over very bad processes, what you still get is bad output. So I think that's the second challenge that we have to be very cognizant of. Are our processes too complex, not scalable, and are they creating not so great experiences? Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Vikrant. So it was quite interesting to hear the challenges that the leaders had to talk about, while some of the challenges are more or less common. So Nirupama talked about sourcing and experience, which most of us are talking about in today's world. Whereas Vikrant greatly talked about how the implementation process is the key aspect. Being a TA leader and having implemented various technology interventions, I can tell you that I certainly see that point as a key. Because at the end of the day, we need to remember, whenever you are coming up with any technology intervention, it's going to impact your business and it's going to impact the people. If you do not have the acceptance, for example, if it's an intervention which impacts the talent acquisition team, and if your recruiters have not bought the point, and if they are not part of the journey, then the entire process probably is not going to succeed, because people do not wish to be associated with the process, right? And I have seen that whenever you make your team understand the reason and rationale behind some of these interventions, you have more buy-in and hence better success rate, right? That has been my personal experience, but I would also like to hear from the leaders. All of you have implemented various technology interventions. Nirupama is in the journey and evaluating various prospects. For the benefit of the audience, what do you think are the key aspects that one needs to keep in mind while implementing any new technology solution? Because I'm sure you agree with me that it's not as simple as you identify a product and launch it in your organization. There's a long process. What are your takeaways? What would you want to suggest to our viewers and our audience if they are looking at this aspect? What should they consider? Anybody?
You can go first, okay. All right. Okay, I think the most important aspect in implementing any kind of a product is the actual problem statement that we're trying to tackle. And if the actual problem statement is not really clear in our minds, we should always try to move off the solution and first identify that first up. Because we as human beings always have a tendency to force feed a problem into a solution. I think it needs to be the other way around. It needs to be the problem first up and then the solution. That would be my first kind of input to the group. Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree with you. So defining the problem and what we are solving for, and what is it that is the end state, has to be very clear, before embarking on any solutioning process. Having said that, I would just like to, it depends on the organization environment. So, for example, in an environment where the organization has a lot of stakeholders that they need to be able to take on board to implement any solution, it's a lot more complex process. So in a GIC kind of construct, where there is an environment where you have a parent company and you have, the offshore setup thousands of miles away, and they're just beginning to realize there's a lot of value here, and a lot of things can go from here to there. But having said that, being able to market the solution well and to be able to present it in such a way that all stakeholders see benefit in it is an exercise worth investing in, because otherwise what happens is it becomes a very prolonged process. So many a time, it kind of stares at us that this is something we need to do. We have to do it, and these are the benefits, and there is a clear ROI. But it is important to spend time in identifying stakeholders, parties affected, to your point on whether it is the teams themselves which are getting affected, because there is a lot of possibility in environments like ours for silent resistance, not really actively, protesting, but there is a possibility to just, drag your feet on it till the solution kind of becomes irrelevant. So I would think, apart from, a kind of defining the problem, which definitely is there, being able to articulate the benefits and the end state, which affects all the key stakeholders, is also another key area which we really need to do, because we really need to get the buy-in. We need to handle policies across various geographies, because what works in India may not necessarily be the way a US partner looks at it, because hiring, people-related stuff is very sensitive, in certain countries. While in India we do have a lot of degrees of freedom, there are various policies which are quite restrictive, when it comes to equal opportunity employers in various countries. So these are early in the journey right now.
I do want to come back to that point, having been through that entire cycle, and so I will come back to that point. But before that, honestly, if any of you, and I'm sure several of you, pretty much, I'm sure most of you are involved in one or the other part of the transformation or are leading it, I think the first housekeeping that anyone who's planning to pick up any sort of transformation is get the data in order. Because a lot of times we do not have the right data, and when we start diving in is when we start figuring out our blind spots. So get that taken care of first. The second thing that you must bear in mind while picking up such a transformation is, do you have the right processes? Are your processes centered around, like I said, in my response to the earlier question, it's not about the business, it's not about our processes, it's about hiring the best talent. And honestly, you wouldn't find the best talent unless your processes or your method of recruiting the process is appealing to the talent. So are your processes talent-centric? Have you been able to bust through the process limitations that your organization might have had? So these are these are the two things that I think one must address as you pick up any kind of digital transformation. Coming back to the point that we're talking about, which is of inclusivity. Every organization will have a lot of sacred cows, and there will be several rebels like us, or maybe rebels like me, who just step in and say, hey, I want to get rid of all the sacred cows. But honestly, that doesn't happen. You have to let the owners of the sacred cows go through their journey to understand that, hey, this is no longer needed, right? These are some processes, these are some technologies that might have been put together by folks. They're very dear to those processes, and technologies are extremely dear to those folks. And there's a certain amount of resistance. Hey, can I really let go? Something that's worked for me for the last several years, what if I let go of now? Will that lead to a breakdown? So, that's a process, that's a journey that each of your stakeholders will make, depending on how progressive they are. Some people will take lesser time, and some people will take more time. But as that rebel in your organization, or as that person, catalyst in your organization, I think you'd have to think of how are you going to be patient about it? And you'll have to figure out your own strategies of communicating and massaging the message. Great.
Thank you. So we heard right from don't try and force fit to the importance of stakeholder acceptance and buy-in, especially if you are in a GIC environment. And I certainly can't agree more, because I come from similar environment. Having gone through this journey, I can completely relate to what you said. to the need of the data in place, right process in place, so that the implementation could be swift. Thank you very much for all these points. One additional point that I could think of is always remember one size does not fit all. If it has worked in some other organization, it's not necessary that it's going to work for you, right? So always be clear in terms of what's your need, what's your problem statement, and then approach it accordingly, right? Because there are many solutions in market these days. So how do you identify the right solution and go about it is the key to success. All right, so in the interest of time, quickly would like to hear from all of you in your respective organizations, what kind of exciting stuffs are happening in the area of AI or technology? What kind of solutions have you already implemented or are planning to implement? And we, of course, respect the confidential sort of stuff. If you don't want to really share product name and so on, we will respect that. But just at high level, just so that everybody knows what kind of stuffs are happening in market. For example, if I have to share, I can talk about what Nirupama was talking earlier. How do you ensure that your job descriptions are targeting the right people and are creating the right sort of interest in the market? And for that, we have implemented an AI solution which reads the job description along with the hiring manager. So it's sort of an assistant for the hiring manager for crafting a job description, and it gives a score to the hiring manager at the end. Talks about what are some of the changes the manager should consider, whether the job description is sounding like targeting a specific gender, because most of our organizations these days are talking about being gender neutral and don't be biased. And sometimes there are unconscious bias even at the time of writing the job description. We don't really understand that sometimes we use words which sort of give an indication that we prefer hiring a specific gender. Right, so we have implemented this solution recently and have seen great results. Would like to hear from you all what kind of stuffs are happening in your organizations that you would like to share with the audience.
I could go, yes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about products in 3 separate spaces. The first one is more housekeeping, but essentially, in order to hire X number of folks, I'm sure you look at a sizable funnel. Typically, it could be from 10 candidates per position that would get sourced to about 15 or maybe 20, 25. Now, this is a critical problem statement as well, because how would you create, if candidate experience is a key outcome of your organization, and therefore the brand, how would you create right experiences for each of those 25 candidates per position? And if you're doing about 20,000 positions in a year, this typically means 500,000 candidates. I have one of my colleagues here sitting, so I'm all smiles. But yes, the first thing that we did was, or we knew we had to do was, we had to kill the funnel or decimate the funnel. So we put up some algorithms using a lot of predictive analytics that would tell us of the 500, or actually not 500,000, but of the 300,000 candidates that were being input into the funnel, how many of them had the probability of getting selected or even becoming successful at Accenture or reneging from the recruitment process. That helps us filter out candidates that we possibly shouldn't proceed with. Now, what I've given is a big data example. It's not. It's more foundational. It's not really AI. The second implementation is about candidate experience. Essentially, how can you put your candidates through a digital experience right from the time they start searching for the job to the time they get their offer letter? So how could you make the scheduling of the interviews? How could you make submission of documents, interacting with recruiters available at their mobiles? So that's the second. The third one, and the third one's definitely AI, and it's becoming hardcore AI soon, which is how do you respond to candidate questions? Can we start screening our candidates using a chatbot? Can we have a chatbot talk to our candidates and figure out, hey, am I evaluating this candidate, or is this candidate evaluating herself for the right position? So how can you construct that conversation using a chatbot? We've also launched something for our internal talent, which tells us if these are the skills that we're looking for, as a hiring manager, you can just go to the chatbot and ask the chatbot, hey, do we have candidates? Do we have supply for this skill? Where is the supply based out of? Is it external pipeline? Is it internal pipeline? So, that's as far as we've been with in our AI journey. But, honestly, there's a lot more to be done, and there's a lot more coming in from AI-powered products. In fact, I was talking to Sanjo today about some of the new products that I saw, and I'm really thrilled about the whole cognitive and the behavioral interviews. And I'm thinking that if we could put up a platform which does a remote interview of a candidate and also tells me whether the candidate has, whether the candidate has the behavioral attributes that I'm looking for or not, why should I even have the candidate travel to my premises? And if you're in NCR, our candidates typically travel 3 states between Noida, Gurgaon, Delhi. So, skip that travel, take the online assessment, get your behavioral inputs out to the hiring manager and take a decision. Yep, so I think there's a lot of possibilities, and we're exciting exploring more and more. Yep.
So one of the things that we are looking at, so we are slightly, I would say, on the journey, started the journey right now, so we're not really there in terms of implementations or implemented solutions that we have. But of course, we do have an innovation hub, which is part of our organization, which does a lot of stuff in terms of in-house innovation to be able to prove concepts, to be able to run pilots. And in an environment like ours, we've seen that that works a little better than to get a vendor in right up front. So that's how we start the journey internally. But having said that, one of the areas that we are really looking at, given the environment we are in, is there a way in which we can kind of develop a view on the future talent landscape that we would like to goal for? So, somewhere that is a problem that we are trying to address, to say that today, we are a young organization, and a lot of organizations like ours have grown because there has been demand, not necessarily because we think the skills that we are recruiting for are going to be relevant in the future. So that's one real, focus area for us, to say that, what we have today, how relevant is it going to be in the future, and what we are having as a pipeline, what should we strategize? Should we source them as team members whom we get in and 2 years later have the same problem that we have with some of the folks that we have today? Or should we look at different strategies for sourcing that kind of talent? Because business has to go on. Everything doesn't get automated overnight. There is business that needs to go on. We need to cater to the requirements, but is there a different way in which we can do it? For example, if there are skills that there is a demand for, which we think will not be relevant, say 2-3 years later, can we then look at partnering with vendors? Why do we need to house the skill in-house? Those are kind of strategic talent sourcing decisioning for which we are trying to see whether we can use data. So I wouldn't even call it so much AI, but trying to understand the market out there with the data that is available, and trying to build strategies around skills, and trying to build a view on the talent that we want in our organization, which will stand the test of at least the next 3 to 5 years. So that is one area. Apart from, of course, the entire team member journey, or the team member life cycle that we call it, where we are trying to see how is it that we can use various aspects of technology, starting with simple, workflow solutions, which would streamline the process. Data cleaning, of course, is a given, but the ability to be able to use various relevant solutions in various parts of the journey to be able to improve the team member experience and the team member journey in the organization. So these are some of the areas that we are focusing on right now. As we are speaking, we have defined some priority areas for ourselves, for which we are looking out for, the right fit solutions. But the key area for us really is in the skill landscape and the skill area that we are trying to see what is it that we need to prepare for, and how do we use data to be able to give us those kind of inputs.
Sure. So maybe I'll start off with talent acquisition as a function, and then talk briefly about the other functions of HR. Now, if we talk about talent acquisition, we can divide it across 4 or 5 phases or stages, right? It starts off with sourcing, which is the talent scouting aspect, uh, then screening, then interviewing, and then mostly candidate engagement. Now, candidate engagement actually is actually a it kind of goes on right from the sourcing through till the onboarding stage. In ZS, at this point in time, we are working on solutions to attack the sourcing and the candidate engagement pieces. And having said that, we have already introduced something in the screening phase, which is basically a text analytics platform, which predicts the outcome of a CV basis a certain job description. It's based on a series of dictionaries and a robust NLP, which is powering it at the background. That's on the screening side. And on the interviewing side, thanks to Talview, we have been able to introduce their product, which is helped us do a bunch of these remote interviews and improve our effectiveness of the process in a huge way. Now, that's on the talent acquisition function. Around learning and talent management, we are also looking at introducing some solutions which will help us introducing some of our learning interventions, obviously by predicting the kind of needs that people may have and so on and so forth. And similarly on the management side, more from a engagement standpoint, and then maybe feeding some of those data points and details to our bonus or comp payouts and so on and so forth.
Great, thanks everyone. So we'd like to take a pause here, and just to ensure that we are engaging you also in the conversation, I would like to open the floor. If anybody has any question, any insights, any thoughts that you wish to share with any of us. If not, then we continue with the discussion. Please, yes.
Because after spending college days in Hanover, Berlin, and Leipzig, we used to discuss about cybernetics. Now the realm has been replaced by AI. As Mr. Raj was telling rightly, AI will replace jobs. You don't know. You in the first you mentioned this, and Madam was telling future landscape. So many things. But my question is, first, politics is most corrupt. Then they said judiciary. Then they said police. Then they said media. Now they say banks. How this AI will replace this corruption in HR, particularly focused HR technology? For Madam, I'm asking. Sorry if I'm putting some, because if I say I am from the media, in Delhi yesterday, one of my friends said, I am from the media. The discussion panel said, please go out. So I don't want to go out. I want reply from you.
Where it might end, let me just understand the question once again. So you're saying, how would AI possibly eliminate corruption? Okay. So I don't think that's the purpose of AI, honestly, because the opportunity that we're saying AI has opened up for us is cutting down cycle times for things which traditionally take much longer, making things much smarter, making decision-making much smarter, more transparent, more centric to the consumer, right? Now, when AI achieves that, the transparency, I'm hoping, and I'd like to underline the word, I'm hoping, that transparency should take care of corruption, but like I said, it's not really what we're looking at solving for. Aside of that, I can only just hope. Yep.
So just let me also take an attempt at this. It's a very thought-provoking question. Thank you for that. So the way I look at it, and again, it's at a very fundamental level, I would think, I'm not sure about AI, but the fact that an economy gets more digitized and there is a lot of trail that is left in an economy when any transaction is done. You know, today a lot of opaqueness is there because there is no trail of transactions that are left, whether it's financial or non-financial really. So the more digitized the economy it becomes, the more ability to track back transactions, track back even interactions, which then with the help of big data analytics and with the help of technology solutions on top of that data, it could be a huge deterrent. I would say it would start as a deterrent, and as and when examples are created, which there is an attempt in many places by using data and using technology or on top of the data to make examples of situations where people are, I would say, exposed or caught, then I would think there will be a clear deterrent in the ability. But of course, having said all that, like we were just discussing before the panel, for every technology and every ability to find something, there are people who become more innovative in using the same technology to be able to achieve what they want to achieve. So, it's like cybersecurity. You just have to keep playing the catch-up game. You keep finding solutions, and the people who want to break it keep finding ways to break it, and you just have to keep catching up and hope that you're running fast enough. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I would say digitization could possibly play a deterrent role. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I am Ankit from Ola. My question is to Vikrant. Actually, you said that for better candidate engagement, you are just going to reduce the funnel, right? So I just wanted to understand how, let's say right now when I'm posting a requisition on the job portal or anywhere, then we get a bunch of CVs, right? And everyone posts regardless of, even without looking at the JD, everyone just applies over there. Then what type of data are you using to weed out the candidates which are not relevant? Do you use the historical data or you are using just the skill match? So if you can share more,
Yeah, so that's a bunch of things that can be deployed there. The first one is to say that, what ZS Associates is piloting, Rahul, I'm sorry. So, what they're piloting is when a candidate's skill comes in to you, is that skill really relevant to the job description? That's a skill match that you could do. Okay, if you've got 25 resumes against a job description, you could figure out, okay, fine, out of those 25, these are the 10 that fit that skill the best. That's one way. The second is, can you do some analysis within your firm to say, what is the demographic of my most successful people? What is the historical demographic of my most successful people? Once you know that demographic, you start filtering out candidates who do not belong to that successful demographic, right? So that's how you could possibly bring that 10 further down to maybe 7. If there's enough data that you could go back and say, okay, this is the kind of folks, or this is the profile of folks who are constantly reneging. For example, we observed that folks with lesser experience coming from tier 1 firms were switching more often and reneging more often. So that helps you further tighten the funnel down and eliminate folks who have a greater probability of reneging. Yep. Like I said, it all depends on the data, and it depends on the hygiene of that data. And obviously, for you to keep that current, you'd have to keep learning the machine. The machine which is running in the background, that'll have to keep learning because the demographics are changing all the time. Yep.
I think, yes, please. In the interest of time, maybe we can take only one more question.
using the traits of your existing, top performers, would you then lose out on, the diversity that you may get and get too homogenous a workforce? I think that would be interesting to hear your viewpoints on that. The general, AI-powered human resources technology may foster that type of environment.
And I'd like to add a little bit more. I'd like to add a bit more complexity to the question, because most organizations today, have commitments to being employers of choice, and therefore we definitely do not want AI to filter out folks based on gender, right? So yes, there are a few decisions that we want our recruiters, as the true blue recruiters, to retain. For example, the source mix. Source mix determines my cost. If for a certain business I have a higher component of agency hiring, then I'd want, out of that pool of 5 or 7 folks that I've been able to digitally identify, I'd want my recruiters to focus on the ones that do not come from agency. Or I'd want my recruiters to focus on hiring more women candidates, right? Now that's where, we would want our recruiters to continue to think of, to continue wearing their thinking hats, understand the business context and the context that the firm is operating in to take their hiring decisions. Yep.
Thank you. So I think it's now time that we close this discussion, because there are other panel discussions lined up for you. Summarizing this discussion, I think the key takeaway is, of course, there are technology solutions, there is AI, but in the current scheme of things, we are at least still looking for that human touch. We are not looking at AI or any technology to replace the human aspect from the human resources, and I think that's the way at least I see the industry going in next 5 years, and the way technology is evolving, I'm sure we would reach higher efficiency levels and maybe things would change. But at least my perspective is in next 5 years, these solutions would be an add-on and not a replacement to what we are doing. Right, so with that, I would like to close the session. I hope we have given you some food for thought. Thank you very much for joining the conversation with us, and I hope you liked it. Thanks to all the panel members.